The capture of the castle was quickly followed by the first pitched battle of the war. It's become known as the Battle of Hyddgen, and it produced a startling result. Glyndwr and his men were heavily outnumbered, probably by 2 to 1. But they still won the day. How they did it, no one really knows. Perhaps it was down to the accurate archery for which the Welsh were renowned. Or perhaps they just had good luck. Either way, the battle had a big effect.
The Battle of Hyddgen marks the new beginning of the rebellion in several ways. In English reports of the rebellion, after that date, you do get a new sense of urgency. It's not the late rebellion in North Wales anymore, but rather that Owain is threatening the English in Wales and the English in England. Now we have a big threat to the crown for the first time.
The Battle of Hyddgen took place near this spot in a very remote part of mid-Wales in the Pumlummon Mountains. And what that battle did was have a real galvanising effect on Welsh people, not just at home, but abroad too. Because those people who'd gone away to pursue their dreams and their careers, from young scholars at Oxford to grizzled old mercenaries in France, well, they all came rushing home to join the revolt. And what they found when they got here was that people in all parts of Wales were rallying to the banner of Owain Glyndwr. The guerrilla war that Glyndwr had started now really began to bite. For what might have been the first time in the country's history, the members of Wales's various communities and its various classes pulled together to defeat a common enemy.
The bulk of the support comes from what we might call the heartland of the northwest and mid-Wales, but it does broaden out geographically into some surprising areas, even in the southeast, which had long been colonised by English settlers.
It does look at one level as a peasant revolt, but it does look too that the middle gentry came over almost en bloc. There's a description of the king telling the sheriffs of the counties of Merioneth and Anglesey and so on to go, and Flintshire, to go and capture Glyndwr, and they all go over to his side. Well, you know, under those circumstances you can't really win.
Henry IV realised that the situation had now got badly out of hand, so he launched a second invasion of Wales, only to discover that Glyndwr and his men had evaporated once again. The king, understandably, was unwilling to be made a fool of once more, so he decided to get tough. If Glyndwr himself couldn't be found, others would be punished in his place. Henry had executed several alleged supporters of Glyndwr on his first visit to Wales a year before, and they included a nobleman called Gronw ap Tudur. The poor chap was quite possibly not a rebel, but he was hanged, drawn and quartered, and his various bits were put on display in Ludlow, Hereford, Chester and Bristol. 1 year on, Henry decided that an even more brutal approach was now called for. He made his way here, to one of the most magnificent Cistercian abbeys in Europe. It was called Strata Florida, or Ystrad Fflir, and it stood in a very tranquil spot in Ceredigion in mid-Wales. When they got here, Henry and his men decided on a display of binge drinking, which lasted 2 days. After that, they turned their attentions to the monks, whom they suspected of being supporters of Glyndwr. That suspicion was correct. So lots of the monks were executed, and Henry then decided to destroy the abbey. It was a shocking act of desecration, and designed to loosen tongues, of course, and uncover the whereabouts of Glyndwr. But it didn't work, so Henry was forced to find new ways of tracing his foe. A local man called Llywelyn ap Gruffydd Vychan offered to help the king to track his quarry. But true Welshman that he was, Llywelyn led Henry on a bit of a wild goose chase, and he was brutally executed as a result, near the spot at the centre of Llandyfri where his statue now stands. Henry no doubt expected Glyndwr to be cowed by this act, but that wasn't what happened at all. Sensing perhaps that a breakthrough was possible, Glyndwr stepped up his military campaign. And in 1402, the third year of his revolt, he began to reap some major rewards. The first stroke of luck for Glyndwr that year was capturing his old enemy, Reginald de Grey, in a further attack on Ruthyn in April. Henry IV would have to pay a huge ransom to get him back, and that must have given Glyndwr quite a lot of pleasure. But that was as nothing compared to the delight he experienced here on Brynglas Hill on the 22nd of June 1402 in a very famous battle against the English. The clash that took place here in mid-Wales was an even bigger disaster for the English than the Battle of Hyddgen had been. As they had been in the earlier battle, the Welsh were heavily outnumbered. And yet, once again, they managed to turn things around. By the time the battle ended, at least 1,000 Englishmen lay dead, while Welsh losses were comparatively small. I wanted to understand how Glyndwr and his men had pulled off such a remarkable victory. So I met up with the author Gideon Brough, who's made a detailed study of all the historical sources relating to the battle. What happened here was very important. What led up to it?
Well, it's a classic trick, really, and it's my contention that Glyndwr pulled off one of the greatest sort of military infiltrations since the Trojan horse. The Welsh archers, who the English had recruited to fight for them, were in fact either Glyndwr's men or had been turned to fight for Glyndwr in the days leading up to that battle.
So the archers, as far as the English were concerned, turned out to be traitors, ready to turn their fire on what seems to be their own side.
And that's exactly what they did on the day. All the chronicles, they tell us in horror that this is what they did. And that's the key point of the battle. Obviously that would sort of cause panic and chaos throughout the English ranks. Their own archers are shooting into them and then attacking them as well with sidearms and swords. That coup, it's that sudden blow, that's the massive impact that shocks the front lines, who were all massacred on that spot there where the Wellingtonia trees now stand. That's the first mass grave site of this battle, where the first row fell down in all of the sort of carnage of the archers unloading and the Welsh smashing into them off the top of the hill. From there, we know that another unit of Glyndwr's men swept around the side of the hill and crushed the remnants of the English army in and around the church, and they were utterly massacred there. There's a second mass grave in there.
So when you look at Glyndwr's military campaign in its entirety, how do you rate this battle?
It's a classic. It shows what a genius he was. Firstly, he infiltrates his enemy. Then he brings them to a place where he can ambush them from within their own troops, off the top of a hill and from the side. It's no wonder that there was total carnage. It was utter slaughter of the English that day.